Hey everyone, this is Andre Sooklal of Extra Time TV, and you're listening to the Bola Bola podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bola Bola Show, the show where we talk about everything and anything about football. So we are back again with another interesting episode. So as usual, together with me in the team, I have my two buddies. So Bala, how's it going?
Hi Alvin, how are you? Hope you're having a good MCO moments,
Yeah.
self-reflection, and also a time of your own. Things are fine with me as usual. And how about Steven? How things with you right now?
I'm okay so far. Life goes on despite of the COVID-19 lockdown. But, let's put that aside and let's just focus on the football. So what do we have to this week, guys?
So this week we've got two interesting friends on board, Sivan, into our Bola Bola family. So maybe you want to introduce our guests.
Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. First thing, closer to us all the way from Singapore, we have Rasvinder. Okay, say hi, Ras.
Hi, hello. It's Rasvinder here.
All right. And since we have not one but two guests all the way from the Caribbean. I know this week Bola Bola episode is going international. So we have Andre of Extra Time TV with us all the way from Trinidad and Tobago.
Hey guys, it's a pleasure to be here, and I really love what you guys are trying to do. So hello from the Caribbean.
Okay. All right. Let's talk. Okay, maybe we can start with Ras first. You want to talk a little bit about yourself? How did you actually become an Inter Milan fan?
Yeah, sure. Well, as everyone would know, Italian football was big in the 90s. So my awareness about football came about after Italia 90. And one day I was about maybe 6 years old. So I was watching on TV highlights of the English Premier League, or rather, in those days was the English First Division, and then Italian Serie A highlights came up after that. So the two names that my father told me about after Italia 90, two Italian players were Roberto Baggio and Salvatore Schillaci. So both were at that time playing for Juventus. So I was looking out to see where these guys were, seeing that they were in Juventus. So I didn't become a Juventus fan, but I was always looking out for these two. And then in 1992, it came about that Schillaci left to join Inter. So I was in a conundrum whether to stick with Baggio at Juventus or move with Schillaci to Inter. And I chose Schillaci. So I became an Inter fan from there on. And I think there's another interesting anecdote would be that the Inter logo used to have a snake in it.
Oh.
And so, in those days, I was also watching WWF. So Jake the Snake Roberts was my favorite wrestler. So,
right.
So Jake the Snake Roberts.
Yeah.
Okay, so Inter Milan.
Oh, it's nice that you tie everything up back to Inter Milan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those were innocent days. 5-6 years old. What do you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about you, Andre? I mean, I know you're an Argentina fan, something that we go some time back. But where did the Inter Milan thing came about for you?
My story is a bit of a hilarious one because I always compare my story with Inter Milan with as a girl. You know that girl that you didn't like in class, but you ended up liking anyway and having a crush on.
Okay.
That's pretty strange because just like everyone else, Italian football was the thing to look at in the 90s. And, I would look at it with my dad and my brother. And even when I was a baby, my entire family was Argentinian fans. But I initially was not I wouldn't say I didn't like them, but because they were German guys on the team, I was, neither here nor there. But it really manifested itself because naturally I would be drawn to Argentines. It's no secret. I would look at teams with a lot of Argentinians, and Parma and Lazio and those teams had a lot of Argentinians, especially under the Passarella era. And it was really around 97, 98 And I would have to say, that was the era that really made me start to fall in love with them. And that's why I use the girlfriend reference, because it was a girl I didn't think I would like, that annoying girl in class.
Okay,
And then,
all right.
Zanetti was the key.
Yes.
All right, all right.
And Zanetti guy.
Okay. Two
I
interesting
mean, so
backgrounds we have here today.
much more, but he was the
Diverse
key.
backgrounds.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So basically, we're gonna go do a throwback. We're gonna throw back to the season 1999-2000. So Elvin, I mean, what can we share about that particular season?
Okay, so the 99-2000 season, of course, there was the record signing of Christian Vieri, okay, brought in for 49 million euros, and of course, he's joining the stellar attacking force of Inter. The names, I mean, you look at the names out there, you have guys like Ronaldo, Zamorano, Roberto Baggio, Recoba was there, of course, and Adrian Mutu as well. The even that guy was there. So how amazing is that? So I've got this question for us, right? With that much of firepower in the team, is this not like a fantasy football already for an Inter fan? Just looking at that attacking talent. So what are your thoughts on this amazing firepower that you guys had at that time?
Well, under Moratti, it slowly became like that because in the initial days, he started slow. He started signing Ronaldo first. Then he brought in Baggio a season after. Then in this season, that's where he had. Zamorano was first. Then Ronaldo, then Baggio, and he was slowly building up. So in those days, I think it was exciting to be an Inter fan because it was like, as you say, a fantasy. Because he built the team like a fantasy manager would build. Like any fan, if you were to name if you had you didn't care about whether your team had the right balance in defense or midfield. If you had those kind of thoughts, you would be filling your team up with all these wonderful stellar names in attacking positions, and that's what Moratti did. So it was fantasy. Yes, it was fantasy. It was fantastic to watch. When it all went right, then it was fantastic to watch.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, Bala, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. This for a question to Andrea. Andrew, right? Sorry. So we are talking about Marcelo Lippi. Came from Juventus. He was one of the idolized Juventus manager, I would say, of all time. After that, I think he couldn't find a replacement. He came to Inter when they're having a disastrous season, finishing 8th with no European qualification. He was supposed to bring back, or at least to glorify Inter's vision with the Moratti, some money and also support. What do you think about it? Or what did you expect from Lippi?
The thing is, as we were saying before, it should have been a really exciting time. They were spending lots of money. We had all these players, and it just felt, at least so people thought, that we just needed that. And I say we because I feel like I'm literally inside the club all the time. These guys, they needed someone to put that puzzle together. And I make the comparison. Inter Milan was pretty much in a glamour club in the line with the likes of Real Madrid, or should have been.
Okay.
And Lippi was supposed to be that experienced guy who comes in and turn things around. And it just didn't work out. And I'll be honest, even I was a lot younger back then. It seemed like it was a period of instability at the club, and Lippi was supposed to be that guy that would come in and steady the ship. Much
Yes.
like how you would get someone like Fabio Capello or someone like that. And it never really worked out. And Moratti, I love him. He's a guy who cares a lot about the club. He has a lot of history with the club. He spends a lot of money, but he was very, he kept, for lack of a better expression, he kept making changes. He was, his changes, he was quite impulsive. And I think his love was also an asset, but also a negative at times, because he kept changing things around. And I think that was the problem. The instability at the club really hurt Lippi, because Lippi's a great coach. A lot of people argue, because of his ties with Juventus and so on eventually. But I don't think so. I think it was just Inter Milan was unstable at the time,
Okay.
and it just never really worked. And it was a bit impetuous, and Moratti showed that a couple times. And I don't think they gave him the time he needed, and the environment. Was not, was a pretty much a rock and roll lifestyle going on at Inter Milan. Just a bunch of big players.
Yes.
These guys were
That
doing
was
whatever they want. It was well documented what these guys were doing. So it was always going to be an uphill challenge. He needed time. He didn't get it.
Alright.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Real Madrid. I mean, in the reply of yours. I mean, Ras, let's not. I mean, we focus on the attacking lineup, but let's look at the other addition that came in. You had your Ivan Cordoba, you have your Angelo Peruzzi, Di Biagio, Panucci, Laurent Blanc, Jugovic, Clarence Seedorf. I mean, wasn't this Galacticos even before the term Galacticos ever came to exist?
Yes, but like people like Cordoba and Seedorf, they came in the winter market. So winter transfer window, they came later. I felt was there were significant players that we lost in the summer because we lost Simeone, Diego Simeone and Yuri Jokaev. Even Aaron Winter, Giuseppe Bergomi was our captain. He retired. Let's see who else we got. Even someone like Zé Alias, he was in that team that nearly won the league in 97-98. Even he could have done a bit of a better job because when you look at the squad after when Lippi took over, we had this vacant area in the center of defense, center of midfield, and that was where I felt there was a bit of a mismatch between it was top heavy because we had a lot of good strikers, good attacking players, but then in the middle because he lost someone like Simeone who could have probably battened down the hatches and kept it tight for us, not make it so loose for teams to attack us. And then we had Laurent Blanc there. At that age, he was probably, I think, in his 30s at least. He had the experience, of course, and Italian football sort of suited his style of play, but he needed someone else as a partner alongside him of caliber, which we didn't have.
Okay, interesting. All right.
Okay, and Andre, I mean, when it comes to, again, I'm always an upfront guy. Again, I like attacking things, and also again, with Christian Vieri on board, and I've always mentioned to this guy also. So to me, the ultimate number 9 is Ronaldo. Okay, until today, I can't find a better number 9 forward out there, despite all the many strikers and all this out there. So why do you think these two guys 3 years? I think they spent about 3 years together. Of course, most of the time injured. That this partnership didn't really fulfill or didn't really work out. This Vieri and Ronaldo partnership. Yeah.
Just to answer your question, we all love attacking football. Those signings were a dream signing for any team. So for Inter Milan, they were making all the right moves, and I guess in my naiveness, I did not understand how the internal runnings of a club worked at the time and how they affected what should have been, in my eyes at the time, a perfect team. Of course it wasn't perfect, but I was young. You're signing the stars, and Vieri, Ronaldo was the guy. I'm an Argentinian fan, but you have to admit, this guy. Anybody would have wanted to have this guy on your team. At the time, my dream team was maybe having Batistuta and Ronaldo, but whatever. That's another discussion.
Yeah.
A couple factors came into play. The club had a lot of instability going on behind the scenes. There was they denied, of course, but there was a lot of big names, a lot of money being thrown around. They were having a lot of parties, and these guys were living the playboy lifestyle. Christian Vieri, as good as he was, I like him a lot. I still do. He has a bit of a playboy lifestyle as well. Ronaldo's a Brazilian. They're known for their party lifestyle, so it wasn't the only. These guys love that, and also the injury to Ronaldo. Inter Milan, I always say never got the best of Ronaldo. They saw him in glimpses and he was scary. I mean, you could look at those YouTube clips and see how, for those who never looked at the games, how scary he was. And I think it was a doomed romance, unfortunately, where you kept seeing players coming in and out of Inter Milan. And I think it reflected itself on how it never really worked out. Vieri is a guy, whether you know it or not, he's a troubled character. Not like how Adriano was troubled, but he had a lot of personal problems. And a lot of these things I'll be saying, it's more on the personal side because I work in that side of the game. And I realize now how impactful it was on Inter Milan. And, that instability affected these players. And they never truly got to I guess, manifest what should have been an unstoppable attacking force. And eventually, Vieri left. Ronaldo had his injury and then it came back again. And, Vieri was already gone by then. And it really is a shame because I think there were so many avoidable factors in there. But unfortunately, Vieri, along with many other, never really panned out as it should. And this could be an entire episode by itself, about that particular story.
Yeah.
You probably need to give me like an hour, but I think, just to summarize it so I won't take up 5 hours on your show, it's just the club was too unstable. And combined with the injuries with Ronaldo and, all the chaos in the club, it never really worked out.
Okay. Right.
There's a lot more, but, it'll take forever.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So I think Lazio the season won the Serie A after a dramatic last game of the season.
Yeah.
And peeping Juventus towards the end of the time. But equally, I think Parma and Inter Milan also was at the same point. And they used to be during in Serie A when the points are equal, they used to have a playoff games.
Yeah.
So I remember watching the game whereby Baggio inspired the entire team, despite coming as a second match. Despite having problem with Marcelo Lippi's connection, he did manage to score 2 goals and brought them to Champions League 4th place. But unfortunately, I think that during the qualifying time against Helsingborg, they didn't make it, and eventually Lippi got sacked. Do you think this premature move from Massimo Moratti, or should he at least leave him a season or 2 for him to build his team?
For me personally, I would say that in that season it was a bit disappointing because we, all the star signings we had and we made, and we had Marcelo Lippi in charge. He's a winner. He brought in people that were like, tried and tested players under him at Juventus. Like Jugovic, Peruzzi. These guys are winners, and Panucci as well has won quite a bit at Milan and then Real Madrid. Laurent Blanc's a winner. A lot of players there that had a winning mentality. Marcelo Lippi also had a winning mentality, but I think he did not really have control with the squad, and there were a lot of problems. So the Baggio Lippi problem was one of the biggest problems. For me, I'm a Baggio fan. He's my all-time favorite player. So it was a dream to have Baggio at my favorite Italian club. So that was a dream. And then when you see, Lippi constantly ignoring him, he didn't play much. He was on the bench. He was in the stands. And then when the time came, it was thanks to Baggio that Inter got into the Champions League in the first place.
Yes.
And I remember reading up on this issue that these two juggernauts of Italian football had with each other, Lippi and Baggio. And I remember Moratti wanted to extend Baggio's contract, but Baggio told Moratti straight up that it's either he extends or Lippi goes. And Moratti just responded to that and told him that if Inter do not qualify for the Champions League, then Lippi is gone. Moratti replied to Lippi and told him, replied to Baggio and told him that. But in spite of that, Baggio still went out, played his best,
Yep.
scored 2 great goals, got Inter into the Champions League, and he left. And so you could see from there that Lippi was already on shaky grounds. So the moment the next season started, we couldn't even get past Helsingborg, for God's sake. I think it was time that Lippi left. My opinion on Lippi was, okay, before he came to Inter, I felt, okay, he's a good manager, he's a great manager, but I think when he came to Inter, my opinion of him and respect of him went down. Of course, he did a great job when he managed Italy to the World Cup glory, and I think that was a lot of it had to do with his tactical awareness and all. But from what I've seen of Lippi, I think he's a kind of manager that needs people around him that would listen to him, that are like so-called yes men to him. Everyone follows him blindly. Only then he can have a squad that can do well and get the best out of them. Otherwise, if he has characters that do not listen to him, that he has to manage and all, I think then, as we can see the example of Inter, it all fell apart. So I don't feel it was premature. I thought it was coming.
But do you feel that if only Baggio would have played the Helsingborg game, would it make any difference? Or maybe they were made it to
No,
the next round of...
I still felt that, if things were better between Baggio and Lippi, then I think Inter wouldn't even have had to play that playoff game. I think Inter might not have won the league, but at least would have got closer to Lazio and Juventus that season. I'm not saying that just one player makes a difference, but it's just that the team was so good, and at times there were so many injuries, like Vieri injured, Ronaldo injured. He only had Zamorano, but still he didn't play Baggio and all. So it's like he was stubborn against playing the best available team until he was forced to do so, and he had no choice. So I felt that season, I felt like we could have ended the season better, but I wouldn't say that one player would have made a difference. I think that even that season when Lippi got sacked, I think some of the signings we made quite underwhelming. I think Hakan Suko, Robbie Keane came in, not quite the standard we were hoping to get at Inter. And still the main problem was our defense and our midfield was not strengthened appropriately. So that part was still lacking.
All right.
Okay.
I hope it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you pretty much summed up exactly what's the problem with Inter Milan. I mean, both you and Andre, I mean, there's a lot of issues behind the scene which didn't really help materialize Massimo Moratti's dream of creating his own Galacticos. But we will end this segment. Coming up is when I believe everything Moratti dreamed of what Inter Milan could be finally came true. So we'll be right back.
Sometimes you win because you are the best team. And sometimes you win because you are the best team from the first to the last minute. And that's the perfect game. Be the best team from the first to the last minute. And that team was my team. And my players. So I'm very, very happy for them. Very, very happy for Inter supporters.
Hi guys, and welcome back again. So as what Steven mentioned, the dream has come true. Okay, and we walk into the Jose Mourinho era of Inter Milan. So Ras, maybe you can explain as an Inter fan, or what are the Inter fans' relationship with this Jose Mourinho guy? It was definitely must have been really a dream, like from where he's coming from, and finally you guys get a really capable guy for this job. So go ahead.
Of course, we love him. We love him to the core. Regardless of how he's doing now as a manager, that's a topic for another day, and we could have another show on that. But I think during this time when he was at Inter, I think it was a dream come true. Because before that, post Calciopoli in 2006, he was inevitable.
Greatest fan making noise there.
Yeah,
Someone doesn't like that one.
The Juventus, all the Juventus misgivings came from there. And I mean, post that, obviously Inter was going to be the strongest team in Italy because we got the benefit of having all the best players come to Inter, and we didn't really have much competition. So Roberto Mancini was building a squad that I felt was quite good. He just was missing something, just a little bit more, the next step to glory. And we got a stroke of luck with this Calciopoli in our favor. So Mancini's time was all well and good in Italy, but we always faltered when it came to playing in Europe. In our local saying between, in Malaysia, we call it Inter became a team that was called Raja Kampung. So you're only good in Italy, and when you come out to Europe, you're not as good. It's something like what Juventus is now. Juventus is a Raja Kampung team to the max.
Okay.
Only good in Italy when all the decisions are in their favor.
Wow. Okay.
But okay, that's also
really
a
hard.
topic for another day.
Okay.
Gauntlet drop.
So we got the Juventus boxing gloves on already.
I see that.
Okay.
Okay.
I told you I'll have something for Juventus.
Okay,
Yeah,
Andre. In case you're wondering what's the whole Raja Kampung means, it's basically we're trying to say that it's something like David Hasselhoff. I know he's I know not David Hasselhoff. I don't know. I mean somebody who does well at home, but seems to flop abroad. I mean that's pretty much the terminology. But
Correct. That's right.
but
Yeah, I
anyway,
got it.
I mean, Andre, I wanted to ask you. We all are well aware of Mourinho's style and his approach to how a football team should play. And it often clashes with the philosophy of most of the clubs that he's managed. Even at Chelsea, despite the fact of winning things, for some reason, either it's the fans or even Abramovich himself was never really satisfied with what Mourinho brings. And obviously with Real Madrid, it was never going to work with someone like Florentino Perez, who expects Madrid to emulate, Barcelona in every single aspect, playing beautiful attacking football. But it seems like with Inter, everything fitted perfectly well. I mean, what can you share with us on that?
Yeah, you said it correctly. The Inter Milan and Jose Mourinho relationship was a match made in heaven, I think, because Inter, as Ras said, Mancini was doing well, but he floundered, in Europe. He always, it felt like something was missing. And for years, we spoke about it before, Inter Milan had their well-documented problems. And, Mourinho, who was at Chelsea, I actually saw Abramovich possibly turning into a Moratti of the 2000s, where, he had this idea of having a dream team. And, Mourinho is a coach. He's a very pragmatic coach. He's very opinionated. We all know this by his sound bites and press conferences. And with Moratti, I think he met Moratti at the right time. I think if he met Moratti at maybe 5 or 6 years before, it may not have been the same. I think they met at the right time where Inter Milan had all the pieces and Mourinho was that guy to put it together. And I saw a whole bunch of interviews where Moratti was full of praise of Mourinho, and he gave him the trust that I think other coaches, maybe Mancini was the only other coach for some time that got that trust, where he trusted Jose Mourinho to do what he was supposed to do. And he said, he was going to give him the resources that he needed. Where before Moratti would probably, perfect example, with the Baggio situation and, players like Recoba, I think sometimes Moratti got too involved with the players. I think that's his admirable trait, but also his downfall. And this time around, he was a bit more mature. Facchetti, I think before he died, added a little more wisdom to the team. And I think, they started to look like they knew what they were doing with the transfers. So when Mourinho got there, he just had to put the pieces together. And, Mourinho loves to be that guy who is me against the world type coach. And there's no other team in Italy that epitomizes that more than Inter Milan. Juventus, we all know I don't have to explain that to this group, the dislike between Inter Milan and Juventus. And, Mourinho was the right guy. I think he had the right personality traits because, even though Inter Milan were dominating Syria, they were struggling, and it was sort of a joke for Juventus and AC Milan that, yeah, you guys had this, the Calcio, and still can't get it done in Europe. And I think from a psychological standpoint, both people, meaning Moratti and Mourinho, were at the right place in time, and they needed a guy who could make those decisions. And Mancini, I think, believe it or not, Moratti had a lot of trust in Mancini. But when they lost to Liverpool and he quit and then he came back, I think we already knew that the writing was on the wall, and Mancini just wasn't the guy to move forward. And Mourinho at the time was, to me, I think that's when Mourinho was at his peak. Tactically, he was just getting everything right. Everyone bought into his philosophy, which is another thing. Because we see now that that's not happening. And as Ras said, that's a whole other show. They trusted him. Having a Mourinho was the hot commodity at the time. And it eventually worked out. The first season, people had a lot of doubts because, they got knocked out against Manchester United. Yeah. And people started to say, maybe he lost season, maybe no longer special. But he showed. He made some very, very, very clinical decisions. I mean, he trimmed the squad down. Players that I really liked. As I said, big Argentinian fan. No big secret in this group. He chopped off a lot of players. Crespo was gone, Budiso, Julio Cruz, all these guys, players that I thought that I would have liked to have stayed. But that's why you bring a guy like Mourinho. He made those tough decisions, brought in Milito and Schneider and those guys, Lucio, Thiago Motta, and Samuel Eto'o, of course, another favorite of mine. And it was a match made in heaven, and a lot of people fell in love with Mourinho because of that. Because no matter how he's doing now, I think the stars aligned both tactically, psychologically, and both the philosophy of Mourinho and the club. It just worked out perfectly. And there's no other way to describe it other than the stars aligned and they won that treble. And, there's no way you could have predicted they were going to win the treble, but you felt like when Mourinho came, something was about to happen. There was an air of optimism. And it turns out, we got the treble.
Okay. Yep. Unforgettable season for any Inter fan, I would say. Yep.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Well, speaking about treble, I think this was a question for both you, Rice, and also Andrew. I start with Rice first. AC Milan have won 7 Champions League.
Yeah.
And also, I think Juventus might have won about 33 Serie A title. But no ever Italian team actually won a treble.
Yes.
So I think Mourinho masterminded the entire squad with his tactical, with his players we had. And I think I would say the Italian is the only coach able to bring the 3 cups to the San Siro. So will he be considered the greatest ever manager among Inter managers?
Okay, just before that, I just want to add a bit on what Andre was speaking about. I think one of the most important thing that we probably overlook is that at that time, the players that he had at Chelsea and then at Inter, the players and the character of the players that he had is different from what he has now at Manchester United and even later on when he moved on from Inter to Real Madrid. The players' character also played a part. So because Mourinho is the kind of manager that he always pushes your button. So he wants to push your button to see how you react to it. And in those days, players and characters were different. They were real manly men, you could say. They would take it and they say, okay, I'll go out there and I'll prove it to you. So that worked in his favor. Then, of course, now in modern day football, players are, you could say, character-wise, a bit softer. So when they get hit by Mourinho in this sense, they crumble. So that's why, that's also an important factor. And losing Ibrahimovic was also important. Because when Mancini was playing, it was all centered around Ibrahimovic, all supplying to him. He was expected to do everything. So losing him, bringing in Eto'o, who worked for the team, I think the last piece of the jigsaw, Wesley Sneijder, because we were missing a playmaker like that, a creative player. So all these signings also like pieces of jigsaw, every signing he made for that treble winning season, all fitting. Okay, now coming back to your question on whether he's the greatest ever manager, in my lifetime, certainly he is. But of course, we have the great Milenio Herrera from the 60s, the mastermind of Catenaccio football.
Yeah.
So he would have a shout out, I'm sure, when it comes to greatest ever manager. But, we were not present in that era. We can't really say. So in my era, certainly Mourinho is the greatest ever Inter manager.
Oh, okay, that's cool. How about you, Andrea? You have the same.
It would sound like I'm repeating what Ras is saying, but I have to agree totally. It's very hard to disagree with what he's saying. Mourinho he achieved something that many coaches could not. Herrera, of course, is legendary. We all know why, because of his Catenaccio creation and so on. But like he said, while on paper, he should be up there and definitely a notable mention. For me, Mourinho would be that guy. It feels like an injustice a little bit to Herrera, but because I experienced Mourinho and saw what he did, I'll have a little more favoritism towards Mourinho. And even before he came to Inter Milan, I liked him since he was in Porto. I liked his style, how he did things. I know not everybody likes his style, but I appreciated what he did. And, I made a bet with some of my AC Milan friends. I was like, Mourinho's going to get us that title. And I'll never let them forget that at all. Because they all told me I was crazy. And I was like, if it's one guy, because when they were playing Barcelona, everybody, Barcelona was the team to beat at that point in time.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, okay, that's it. They're done. And I was like, nope. If there's one guy, because he was doing everything right at the time. Oftentimes because of his character, his tactical acumen gets, ignored, especially now because he's, kind of struggling a bit. And as Ras said, the players are different now, but I think he's brilliant. I think, his analysis of games and adjusting and building teams is brilliant. And I think his character sometimes overshadows his brilliance. And for me, he will always have a special place. And I think Inter Milan fans will agree. He is the man. And he brought them, that trouble in a time where a lot of people didn't give Inter much of a chance. So Jose Mourinho for me.
All right.
Okay. Just to wrap up this segment, since we're talking about Mourinho, I remember watching a documentary about during that time with Inter, and when the moment he was about to leave Bernabeu after the Champions League final, I think he got out of the car and he went to hug Materazzi, if I'm not mistaken. And he was crying and all that. To me, that was the first time I was seeing Mourinho on his very emotional side. Finally, he's showing that human side of him, the side that we often never see in the past. And I have to say, I was really, really touched by that moment of what he accomplished as a manager, as a person with Inter Milan. Okay, we're done with the Mourinho era, so we'll move on to the next segment shortly.
Milito is the hero. Inter are European champions for the first time since 1965. Tears for the captain, Javier Zanetti.
Okay, we're back now with another segment. And as you know, there's always this thing about whereby a certain club may have certain connection with another country, not the country where they are based, but in another country other than the country they are based. The most common connection one can say is Barcelona and the Netherlands. Now, when it comes to Inter Milan, I have to say, somehow or other, it seems like there's only one connection, and that is the Argentinian connection. Because throughout Inter Milan's history, I've never seen, I'm not sure there was any time where there was no Argentina player on the roster. Somehow or other, there's always an Argentina player there. What can you share with us, Ras, on this rich Argentine history with Inter?
Well, I really can't say too much. There's always this connection with Argentina, and I think there was a certain point of time when Inter were really struggling, post treble season and all that. And every time we went out in the market with signing Argentinian players, I was like thinking we might as well play in the Argentinian league. I was getting fed up because I support Italy. I want to see more Italian players at Inter. I know that the club's history is such that it's Internazionale, which means formed from a team that is welcome to players from all over the world. But I thought it was getting a bit too much. But I think the Argentinian players that there were in my time as a fan, they were really good, and I really appreciated these players. I had the fortune of having Juan Veron there. I think he's for me my favorite Argentinian player.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Marginally over Zanetti because Elvin, I love all these attacking players, all attacking playmakers, forwards. So Juan Veron gets my vote. So he was there. It was always beautiful watching play. So we had Zanetti, Cambiaso, Milito, Walter Samuel, Hernan Crespo. When he came in the first season, I think he was really clinical. It was really good signing. He had Kili Gonzalez, Rodrigo Palacio, Simeone, Budiso. You can go on and on. Lots of players, lots of good players. I think that served Inter well. And also one player that I'm not really fond of is currently not at the club, but he's owned by the club. Is one certain Mr. Mauro Icardi.
Okay.
That's the only Argentinian player I'm not really fond of at all.
All right. Okay. I mean, I'm sure there's one player none of us are fond of. But the fact that you mentioned Veron, I think, Elwin, you might want to share something here.
Yeah, I'm also a huge fan of Veron, and when of course, and I also support Manchester United. So for me, it was a match made in heaven when Veron came to MU. So I think Ras, you also felt.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So Veron, of course, during that era was definitely dominating the Serie A. So it was great, definitely great. But for me, if you ask me, my personal Inter favorite player is Zanetti. I mean, that's just what I have to say for now. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Talking about Zanetti, I think Zanetti always reminds us of Superman. I always see him as Superman because his pictures and the way he runs the wing, I think belongs to him. I think the only one can match him, I think, would say Cafu in the right side. But we're looking at Esteban Cambiaso, also hardworking midfielder. He has a defensive midfielder and MC kind of box-to-box midfielder. Between both of them, Andrew, what do you think? Who the best among them? The more inspiration and also.
Between Zanetti and Cafu? Is that the question?
Esteban Cambiaso.
Oh, as an Argentinian fan, that's a really hard question for me. But
as an Inter fan?
Yeah, it's. But as an Inter fan, I've always loved Zanetti. He was always my role model. When I played, funny enough, since we're talking about it, Zanetti and Veron were the two guys I based my style after. But this is such a tough question. But I'm going to have to say it's going to be Zanetti. But that's not taking anything away from Cambiaso. Cambiaso is an amazing player. I think he was one of those players that was just a bargain for Inter Milan. Because not just financially, but what he contributed to the team. But Zanetti, definitely, it's funny how you use the Superman reference, because that's exactly how I refer to him. He seemed like he was unstoppable. He could not be dispossessed.
Yeah.
He had impeccable character. He dominated the right wing. You put him in any position and he was very comfortable. He never looked uncomfortable. He played right wing back, left wing back, defensive midfield. This guy could do it all. And I still think to this day, I have my Zanetti jerseys and posters and so on. I have discussions with Chaka Hislop and those guys. And we were talking about our favorite players. And we spoke about how Zanetti in the footballing world is such a respected figure. Yet we still don't think that he gets the recognition that he deserves. But I think he is my favorite. And unfortunately, I would always choose him over Cambiaso, but that takes nothing away from Cambiaso.
Okay.
If I can add on this too. For me, Zanetti is like a tank. When he's running with the ball, there's nobody who can get the ball off him. He was a tank. Yeah, and he did it. He can last the whole 90 minutes or more without getting his hair out of place. His hair from first till the end is always there, intact, in place. What a player. And
I know, that's
Cambiaso-
crazy.
Pardon?
Yeah, I know, I agree.
Yeah, okay.
And,
Cambiaso,
and he doesn't look like he even broke a sweat.
yeah,
you know.
correct. That's how fit he is.
I think talking about Zanetti, I think as even as a Juventus fan, I think to have him as a captain, I think will be very, very, very calming situation, because I think when he leads, I think he really leads by example. He's very inspiration to the team, and also I think he's not unlike like Roy Keane, who like give a lot of shout out or like a lot of expos, but he's more calm, more composed, and trying to get the team moving. I don't know what kind of magic he used, but it always works.
Yep.
I think Zanetti would be like what Facchetti was in the 60s. They both are quite similar, I feel.
I
Okay.
think so too.
Yeah. And on Cambiaso, I think Cambiaso doesn't get enough credit, because people look at him and say, okay, Cambiaso's an defensive midfielder. But I think he had a lot of intelligence, a lot of tactical intelligence. He knew where to place himself. He read the game well. He didn't need to come flying into tackles all the time, not like Simeone would be, kicking you up and down the pitch. He would be very calm, very collected. He knew when to put in the tackle, when to read the ball, when to read where the ball's going to go to and cut you off. And he could play. He could play with the ball at his feet as well. Very good passer of the ball, technically very good. And he used to come forward and score good goals as well. So I think he also didn't get a lot of credit.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. Cambiaso was such an amazing guy. Like I remember even at Real Madrid, I'm an Inter Milan fan, but I would look, obviously I'm an Argentinian fan as well. So wherever there were Argentinian players, I would keep an eye on them. Like, I'm sounding like if I'm the Argentina coach, but, he was so good. I remember Mourinho described him as, Cambiaso's mental quickness, compensated for a lot of, at the time, the Premiership was, people were praising the Premiership for their pace and power, but he represented a type of player that, was often overlooked for the more quote-unquote glamorous players who ran all over the pitch. And, he was so brilliant. And I thought Real Madrid were crazy to sell him, and I was so happy when Inter Milan got him, and Samuel as well as others, Solari and those guys. But, Cambiaso was a guy, when I saw him and Zanetti play together in the midfield, it was such a calming influence, both of these guys. You felt safe with these two guys in the midfield. And, Zanetti played all over. But Cambiaso, you are so correct. I think he's a player that I wish he never left Inter. I really thought he should have stayed till the end of his career, but, he eventually left. I really thought he would have been the successor for Zanetti when Zanetti retired, whenever that was. And, I could probably ramble off on Cambiaso for hours, but you're so right. He's such a great player. And even to have him and Mascherano on the Argentine national team was such a luxury. I would hear people who did not even like Inter Milan give him such praise. So it was great to see him, and I get a little nostalgic thinking about it. So good times.
Okay. All right.
Okay, and all right. So and I have a question for Ras. So I mean, you did mention this name earlier. So let's get into this guy now. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Mauro Icardi? I mean, to me, he's an extremely talented goal machine. Okay, the guy is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the 6th highest scorer in Inter's history. Okay, he was named captain. But at the same time also extremely controversial, with all the controversies surrounding around him, his wife Wanda Nara's dramas and the spat with the Inter fans in his autobiography, what do Inter do with him after this PSG deal is done, because now, in fact, I hear that Juve and Napoli are interested to sign him as well. And this guy, is only 27. There's still so many years ahead of him. So, as an Inter fan, will you keep this guy or will you let him go? Or is the damage already done? Or is there any chance that, he can get out-coached out of his certain behaviors? Yeah.
My opinion is just straightforward. Sell him. That's it. End of story. I think they should have sold him much earlier when his wife, who became his agent, started doing all shenanigans with trying to increase his pay and then putting him out that these so and so clubs are interested in signing him, and that was like twisting the arm of the club to say that okay, you don't give him a pay raise and contract extension. That's it. We're gonna go to your rivals. So that was twisting the arm. I think at that point they should have already sold him, but disappointed that they kept him. And my personal grievance with him started when all this love triangle between him, Maxi Lopez and Wanda, of course. I mean, what they do in their personal life is up to them. Let it be. But the way he conducted himself after that, I think that left it in a poor taste. I mean, if you left you don't go around boasting about it, I would have still, I would have just ignored that part in his personal life. But, I think the way he conducted himself about it, I think didn't go down well. I know Diego Maradona doesn't think too highly of him as well. So probably myself and Maradona have something in common now.
Okay, but what about Andre? I mean, like, are certain behaviors of Icardi, if a good coach comes along, is somebody able to mentor him, get him out of his nonsense and concentrate back on football? Because he is a machine, guys. I mean, he is scoring a lot of goals wherever he goes.
The thing is, it's an interesting question because when I was younger, I was a fan, but now I work in football, and this is maybe an area that is very challenging. That sometimes, we as fans, because I'm sometimes both, of course. We spoke about it earlier. You have a squad, and you're like, these guys are really good players. And I have Terry Fennick, former England international. He calls it the FIFA game mentality, where you have these squad players, you pick the right players, and sometimes it just doesn't work. I've been in environments, obviously in a smaller scale, with Trinidadian clubs in CONCACAF, Champions League, and so on, where it's not like the Icardi situation. Nothing is like the Icardi situation. That is just, but it's very similar, and it's coaches often have to be almost like psychiatrists and psychologists, and both, to be honest. And I have seen very good teams get undermined by players with character that's really poor. And Icardi is a talent without a doubt. And I've seen some coaches try to make it work, and it's going to be very difficult because he has such a repeated occurrence of doing stupid things. Like as Ras was saying, what he did with his personal life is, I really couldn't care less about that, but he was so public about it, and I was willing to forgive him for that. And I think coaches were willing to forgive him. I think Mancini thought, if I give him, because that's when Mancini came back, if I gave him the captaincy, I can't remember who it was at the time, when David Beckham got his captaincy, he was seen as a troublesome character as well for England. And sometimes coaches believe if you give players more responsibility, they rise to the occasion. And usually, I mean, it may sound biased because I'm an Argentinian fan, but usually Argentinian players, even though nobody's perfect, they usually are very professional, at least on the field, and they rise to the occasion. And they tried that with Icardi and it didn't work, and then they give him another chance and another chance and another chance. And I think maybe it's time to cash in. I think he needs a fresh new environment. He has a similar traits to like Mario Balotelli, where people keep giving him chances. And football, is a very fickle sport. Look, he went to PSG, and I think it's going to be a very monumental task. And someone raised the point previously about players being different. Ras, I think it was you, where when Mourinho was around, the players were more mature and tough. Yeah. They were men. Now we live in a new era where these guys, when things go wrong, they run to social media. And that's a problem, not just at Inter Milan, but with world players right now.
Yes.
The players now, if you can't discipline them, when you tell them things, they go to the public and they start looking at other clubs. And, it's quite difficult to manage these guys now. When you try to lay down the law, and then with Wanda as his agent, I always say she's not an agent. She's a publicist, a glorified publicist, where she is all about her brand and his brand and not necessarily the club. and her decision making. I think honestly, he's a grown man and he needs to make his own decisions. But if she was not in the picture, I think I saw glimpses where Icardi was willing to change, but he has shown that he is incapable of doing it, and that Wanda is heavily influential in his decision making. And it's to answer your question, to really end it off, it's that I think I don't envy the coach that gets Icardi. So
Okay.
But then,
Bala.
Yes.
So in this case, then, since both these guys are willing, more than ready to offload Icardi, okay.
I think I would glad to
What about
accept
Juve?
it.
What about your thoughts on Juve's interest on this guy?
I think Icardi would be in the, I would say, because I don't talk of final jigsaw puzzle, because Juventus are trying so many final jigsaw puzzle, especially Ronaldo. But I think it would be a good signing, because having said that, because Balotelli came in with Mancini, he had a lot of problems with Mancini. But when he came in, Mourinho wasn't able to fully control him, but at least he was able to at least make a best out of him. So I think with similar issues happening currently with Inter Milan, with Inter or with Icardi as well. So I don't know. I still feel he's okay, but the only thing is like what Andrew said, and also Ras, because I think his personal life is interfering with the on the off the field. I think that might be impacted on his performance. But I think, having said that, I think the Juventus won't sign players simply. So if they sign, we should sign the best. Let's see where it goes.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I mean, another Argentinian football player, Lautaro Martinez. Of course, there's a lot going on about him as well. So, Andre, I mean, Barca is knocking on his door right now. Do you think that he might leave as well when things gets back to normal, when the seasons resume?
The thing is, being an Argentinian fan and an Inter Milan fan, as an Inter Milan fan, I really wanted to stay, because when Icardi left, he really showed what he's capable of, that he is the go-to guy for Inter Milan, even though Lukaku's there as well. And, that's the price of success. Those clubs are going to come knocking at your door. And, Lautaro, when he started to really perform at the beginning of the season, he was always doing well, but he really came into his own. I was already telling my friends, like, oh no, those clubs are going to come knocking. And, it's going to be hard to keep him. It's really going to come down to Lautaro, and it seems like he's entertaining that discussion, and also the appeal of playing with Leo Messi, on the national team and for Barcelona. It's very hard to ignore that. Unless it's Zanetti, I would have said he's not going anywhere. But Lautaro, I think it's highly likely he's going to go at some point, which is sad. I think that the appeal of playing with a team like Barcelona and Leo Messi, I think that's the selling point. I think any player would want to play with Leo Messi, and I think he may try to hold off a bit, and I think he is doing the negotiating a lot better than Icardi does with Wanda, where he's kind of flirting with both teams. I think he cares about Inter, but I think he may not go next season. I think he will go maybe a season or two from now. I think that's when he'll go. I think he still has some stuff he wants to prove with Inter Milan, but it looks highly likely that at some point he's going to leave Inter. I can't exactly say when, but I think he is going.
Okay. I suppose, when your opportunity to play alongside Messi comes along with such move, it's a bit difficult to say no, but, something, it's remained to be seen for now. But I suppose for Inter fans, loving Lautaro, they would want him to stay. But
I want him to stay.
Okay.
I want him to stay really bad, though. I really want him to stay. I don't want him to leave at all, but
okay. All right.
I think, yeah.
Okay. With that said, we will move on to the next segment.
So there you have it, guys. It's the conclusion of the first part of our Inter Milan podcast with our guests, Andre and Ras. We hope you enjoyed it, and do look forward to the second part of the podcast, which will be coming up, where we'll be talking about memorable matches, the best Inter Milan dream team of our two guests, and also what does the future of Inter Milan with the Suning group now in charge of the club. We hope you enjoyed it, and thank you all again for your support, and majulah bola-bola untuk negara.